Welcome to today's episode, where we explore one of humanity's most fascinating and essential traits: empathy. Empathy is our ability to feel what others feel, to step into their experience, and to let their joys and sorrows resonate in our own hearts. But what exactly is empathy, and why do we have it? Some scientists argue that empathy is hardwired into our biology, a survival mechanism that evolved to keep social groups strong. Others see it as a moral duty, a virtue that must be practiced and cultivated through culture, education, and spiritual discipline. In this episode, we will investigate both perspectives. We'll ask, is empathy truly instinctive, or is it learned? Is it enough to simply feel with others, or must empathy also guide us to act ethically? We'll consider insights from philosophy, psychology, neuroscience, and religion. We'll look at how empathy appears in literature and history, shaping our understanding of morality. And we'll ask a profound question. If empathy is a natural trait, why do humans still struggle with cruelty, indifference, and division? Through these reflections, we aim to understand empathy not just as a concept, but as a force that shapes our personal lives and our collective humanity. Empathy begins with connection. Even in infancy, studies show that babies cry when other babies cry, suggesting that the seeds of empathy are planted before language and culture. Neuroscientists point to mirror neurons, cells in our brains that fire both when we act and when we observe someone else acting. These neurons create a bridge between self and other, giving us a biological foundation for empathy. Evolutionary biologists argue that empathy developed to ensure cooperation and survival in early human tribes. A group that cared for its members stood a better chance of thriving than one driven by indifference. But culture also plays a role. Religious and philosophical traditions across history have taught compassion as a virtue to be cultivated. The Buddhist teaching of karuna emphasizes compassion for all beings. Christianity highlights empathy through the commandment to love your neighbor as yourself. And philosophers like David Hume suggested that empathy, or sympathy, is the basis of morality itself. The interplay between biology and culture makes empathy both instinctual and teachable, both natural and nurtured. Understanding these roots allows us to see empathy not as a fixed trait, but as something we can deepen throughout our lives. Philosophers have long debated the role of empathy in morality. For Aristotle, virtue was cultivated through habit, and while empathy was not a central term in his writings, compassion was seen as essential to a flourishing life. David Hume, in the 18th century, argued that sympathy, what we now call empathy, was the foundation of moral judgments. Without it, reason alone could not move us to care about others. Immanuel Kant, however, was more skeptical. He believed that duty, not emotion, should guide morality. While empathy might inspire kind actions, only duty could make them truly moral. In modern times, Martha Nussbaum has argued that literature cultivates empathy by inviting us into the lives of others, thus expanding our moral imagination. Meanwhile, Peter Singer advocates for an expanding circle of empathy, urging us to extend compassion beyond our immediate groups to all humanity, and even animals. These debates remind us that empathy is not just a feeling, but a subject of deep ethical reflection. Is empathy enough to guide morality, or must it be paired with reason, justice, and responsibility? This question lies at the heart of our inquiry today. Religious traditions around the world have elevated empathy and compassion as spiritual imperatives. In Buddhism, empathy appears in the concept of karuna, the practice of compassion toward all beings, rooted in the understanding of shared suffering. In Christianity, The command to love your neighbor as yourself makes empathy not just an emotion, but a divine duty. Jesus himself modeled radical empathy by healing the sick, embracing the outcast, and forgiving enemies. In Islam, the Prophet Muhammad emphasized mercy and compassion as core to faith, teaching that true belief is incomplete without empathy for others. The Quran speaks of God as the most compassionate, the most merciful, urging believers to embody those qualities. Hinduism also reflects empathy through the principle of ahimsa, or non-violence, teaching that compassion toward all life is essential to spiritual progress. Across these traditions, empathy is framed as both a human and a divine responsibility, showing us that compassion is not optional, but central to the human journey. Religion thus offers not only guidance, but also rituals and practices to cultivate empathy in daily life. Neuroscience has given us powerful insights into the workings of empathy. Studies show that when we see someone in pain, our own brain's pain centers activate as if we are experiencing it ourselves. This doesn't mean we literally feel the other person's pain, but we experience an echo of it, enough to connect emotionally. Mirror neurons play a key role here, bridging observation and experience. But empathy is not uniform. It can be influenced by bias, familiarity, and group identity. For example, research shows we tend to feel stronger empathy for people who look like us, think like us, or belong to our social group. This raises ethical questions. If empathy is natural, why does it sometimes fail us in moments of prejudice or conflict? Psychology also shows that empathy can be cultivated. Practices like loving-kindness meditation have been shown to increase empathy and compassion in measurable ways. The science suggests that empathy is both built into our biology and shaped by experience. This dual nature challenges us to not only rely on our instincts, but also to deliberately expand our circles of care. From an evolutionary perspective, empathy may have been essential for survival. Early human communities thrived not through strength alone, but through cooperation and mutual care. A tribe that helped its sick and shared resources had a higher chance of survival than one that abandoned its members. Empathy thus acted as a glue that held early societies together. Even today, we see this in small ways. When disasters strike, communities rally around one another. In times of crisis, empathy can override individual self-interest, creating solidarity. Yet, there's a tension here. Empathy evolved for small groups, but in today's globalized world, our moral challenges are much larger. We must extend empathy beyond kinship and tribe, reaching strangers and even distant nations. This requires conscious effort, expanding empathy from a survival mechanism into a moral principle. By reflecting on this, we realize that empathy is not only about feeling, but also about choosing how wide our circle of care should be. Literature has long been one of humanity's greatest tools for cultivating empathy. When we read a novel, we enter into the minds and lives of characters different from ourselves. Martha Nussbaum argues that literature expands our moral imagination by forcing us to live through experiences we might never encounter in real life. Reading Les Miserables, for example, allows us to feel the struggles of the poor and the outcast. Toni Morrison's Beloved compels us to confront the lingering trauma of slavery through deeply human stories. Shakespeare's tragedies reveal the inner lives of kings and commoners alike, reminding us of shared vulnerabilities. Through story, empathy becomes more than biology. It becomes moral education. Literature doesn't just entertain, it humanizes. It gives us practice in compassion, inviting us to understand others in their complexity. In an age of polarization, returning to literature can remind us of our shared humanity. Feeling empathy is only the first step. What matters is what we do with it. Psychologists distinguish between emotional empathy, feeling with others, and compassionate empathy, which motivates us to take action. Without the bridge to action, empathy risks becoming passive. For example, seeing someone in distress might move us emotionally, but unless we offer help, the impact remains incomplete. Religious traditions often stress this link between empathy and action. In Christianity, empathy without works is seen as incomplete. Buddhism teaches that compassion must translate into acts of kindness, not just inner sentiment. In daily life, empathy in action can mean small gestures, listening attentively, offering comfort, or standing up against injustice. Empathy calls us to go beyond identification toward transformation. The test of empathy, then, is not just whether we feel, but whether we act in response to that feeling. Although empathy is powerful, it has limits. Psychologists warn that empathy can be biased and partial. We may feel great empathy for those who resemble us while ignoring the suffering of strangers. Sometimes empathy can even distort justice. For example, a judge swayed by sympathy for one party may neglect impartial fairness. Philosophers like Paul Bloom argue that empathy alone is insufficient for moral decision-making and sometimes harmful. He suggests that compassion guided by reason is a better framework. Empathy can also lead to burnout, especially for caregivers who absorb the pain of others without boundaries. This raises an important question. Do we need to balance empathy with reason, justice, and self-care? The answer seems to be yes. Empathy is essential, but not absolute. It must be paired with wisdom, fairness, and resilience to guide us toward ethical living. Modern society offers a paradox when it comes to empathy. On one hand, technology connects us to distant suffering instantly, through news, social media, and storytelling. On the other hand, constant exposure can numb us. We scroll past tragedies without pausing, overwhelmed by compassion fatigue. Yet empathy still surfaces powerfully in moments of crisis. We saw this during global pandemics, natural disasters, and humanitarian emergencies. Ordinary people stepped up to help strangers. This suggests empathy has not disappeared. It has shifted. The challenge today is how to sustain empathy without burning out, and how to extend it beyond moments of crisis into everyday life. We must ask, are we becoming more empathetic or less? The answer may depend on how deliberately we choose to nurture empathy in a world flooded with information and distraction. Empathy and justice are deeply intertwined, yet not always aligned. Empathy helps us understand the experiences of others, fostering compassion and moral action. Philosophers like David Hume argued that our sense of morality is grounded in feelings, including empathy. Without empathy, laws and ethics can feel cold and detached, lacking human connection. Yet empathy alone can be partial, favoring those close to us while ignoring distant or marginalized individuals. This is where justice must act as a corrective, ensuring fairness beyond immediate feelings. Religious traditions emphasize this balance. In Islam, empathy is linked with justice, encouraging care for the oppressed while upholding fairness. Christianity teaches love for neighbor tempered with principles of righteousness. Buddhism emphasizes compassion alongside wisdom, guiding actions that reduce suffering universally rather than selectively. Literature illustrates the tension as well. In Les Miserables, Jean Valjean's empathy challenges the law, prompting reflection on mercy and justice. Empathy motivates moral courage, but ethical reasoning ensures that compassion is extended wisely. Modern debates on social justice often rely on this interplay, understanding the pain of others while designing fair systems. Empathy is the heart, reason is the compass. Together, they guide us toward a more ethical society. Recognizing the limits of empathy while cultivating it ensures we act with both care and fairness. Empathy is a universal human capacity, but its expression varies across cultures. In collectivist societies, empathy often emphasizes group harmony, valuing the well-being of family, community, and tribe. In individualist cultures, empathy may focus on respecting personal autonomy and understanding individual struggles. Philosophers like Confucius stressed empathy as a moral duty, ren, or humaneness, guiding social relationships. Religious traditions also shape empathetic expression. Hinduism teaches ahimsa, nonviolence rooted in compassion for all beings. Judaism emphasizes chesed, acts of loving kindness grounded in understanding another's plight. Christianity encourages active love and empathy for neighbor and stranger alike. Literature reveals how stories can bridge cultural differences, creating empathy for experiences outside our own. Modern psychology highlights that cross-cultural empathy is possible, though it requires effort and awareness of bias. Globalization challenges us to expand our circles of care beyond familiar communities. Technology, media, and travel can foster understanding, yet can also reinforce stereotypes if empathy is not mindful. Teaching empathy across cultures encourages dialogue, reduces prejudice, and builds collaborative solutions. Empathy is both innate and learned, biological and social, personal and universal. By understanding these cultural nuances, we can navigate the global landscape with compassion and insight. Looking ahead, empathy may play an even greater role in shaping society. As technology advances, humans face ethical decisions affecting people and ecosystems worldwide. Artificial intelligence, climate change, and global conflicts demand empathy that transcends immediate circles. Education systems increasingly emphasize emotional intelligence, teaching children to recognize and respond to others' feelings. Neuroscience suggests that empathy can be strengthened through deliberate practice, such as mindfulness, perspective-taking, and storytelling. Social media campaigns show that emotional engagement can mobilize communities for humanitarian causes. However, overexposure to suffering online can lead to compassion fatigue, highlighting the need for balance. Philosophers debate whether cultivating empathy is a moral obligation or a practical necessity for survival. Some argue that a society unable to empathize risks fragmentation and violence. Religious traditions have long urged intentional cultivation of compassion, teaching that empathy is a duty and a virtue. Literature, psychology, and philosophy all point to the same conclusion. Empathy must be practiced and refined. Communities, organizations, and governments can create environments that encourage understanding and care. By fostering empathy deliberately, we ensure it evolves alongside society. The challenge is to harness our biological instincts with conscious reflection, turning feeling into thoughtful action. The future of empathy depends not only on our biology, but on our commitment to moral and social growth. Is empathy a duty, a biological imperative, or both? Philosophers suggest it can be considered a moral requirement. Kantian ethics emphasizes treating others as ends in themselves, which requires understanding and concern. Essentially, empathy in action. Religious traditions similarly frame empathy as moral responsibility. Christianity teaches the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Buddhism and Hinduism call for compassion toward all living beings. Empathy connects humans to morality, encouraging ethical behavior. Psychology shows that empathy motivates pro-social behavior, cooperation, and altruism. Yet empathy alone is insufficient. It must be paired with ethical reasoning to avoid bias and injustice. Literature, philosophy, and science converge on this insight. Feeling is the beginning, not the end, of ethical life. Without empathy, justice is hollow. Without reason, empathy can mislead. Developing empathy, therefore, is both a biological and moral imperative. It ensures that humans can build communities, resolve conflicts, and respond to suffering. By nurturing empathy, we create a foundation for a more compassionate, just, and ethical society. Ultimately, empathy is a bridge from instinct to intentional moral action. For those wishing to dive deeper into empathy, there is a wealth of resources. Books offer both practical guidance and philosophical insights. Leslie Jamison's The Empathy Exams provides deeply personal narratives exploring human emotional experience, helping readers understand empathy in context. Paul Bloom's Against Empathy challenges assumptions, showing that raw feeling is insufficient for moral reasoning. Frans de Waal's The Age of Empathy draws on evolutionary biology to explain how empathy evolved in humans and primates. Roman Krznaric's Empathy, Why It Matters and How to Get It offers strategies to cultivate empathy intentionally in everyday life. Joshua Greene's Moral Tribes examines empathy in complex, modern social dilemmas. Podcasts complement these readings. Laurie Santos's The Happiness Lab explores empathy, altruism, and the psychology of human connection. Philosophize This, by Stephen West, delves into philosophical frameworks that intersect with empathy and moral reasoning. Krista Tippett's On Being brings a spiritual and reflective lens, featuring conversations with thinkers who explore the human capacity for empathy. Websites like the Greater Good Science Center provide research-based strategies for practicing empathy, while the Stanford and Internet encyclopedias of philosophy offer rigorous academic overviews. Together, these resources provide insights across literature, science, philosophy, and spirituality. Engaging with them encourages reflection, growth, and practical application. For anyone committed to understanding empathy, these books, podcasts, and websites form a comprehensive guide for personal and societal development. Empathy is both a biological instinct and a moral choice. It allows us to connect, understand, and act in ways that improve the human experience. Science shows it is hardwired, yet culture, literature, and religion teach us to refine and expand it. Empathy motivates compassion, guides justice, and inspires ethical action. It challenges us to look beyond ourselves, to listen, to care, and to act. Yet empathy requires balance, awareness, and reason to avoid bias, overextension, or partiality. Across cultures, literature, and spiritual traditions, empathy is celebrated as central to the good life. It fosters connection, cooperation, and community. By cultivating empathy, we nurture not just others, but our own capacity for understanding and moral insight. The future of humanity depends on our ability to expand and direct empathy wisely. This is not just a feeling, it is an imperative. It is a call to act, to reflect, and to transform the world through understanding. As we conclude, consider how you can practice empathy daily, in thought, word, and deed. Let empathy be both your instinct and your guide. In doing so, we participate in creating a more compassionate, fair, and enlightened society. The power to transform is in our hearts and actions. Embrace it.